The scent of roasted turkey and bubbling cranberry sauce drifted through my mother's house, but beneath it all, I could still catch the unmistakable whiff of judgment. Another Thanksgiving with the Thompsons, another evening of polite smiles, sharp remarks, and thinly veiled criticism about my unconventional life choices. "Look who finally decided to show up," my sister Rebecca called out as I stepped inside. "Must be tough to tear yourself away from that little, what do you call it again? Boutique?" "It's called the Corner Shop," I replied evenly. The name was simple by design, an easy disguise for what really went on behind it. The living room gleamed with the symbols of my family's version of success. Mom's awards from Reynolds Corporation decorated one wall, Dad's golf trophies filled their glass case, and Rebecca's law degree hung like a crown jewel above the fireplace. And then there was me, Jessica Thompson, the family's artsy disappointment, supposedly running a modest vintage store in downtown Portland. "Jessica's here," Mom called from the kitchen. "I thought you'd be too busy with your Black Friday sale. Isn't that a big day for shops like yours?" "Shops like yours." The phrase made it sound like I sold trinkets from a folding table instead of managing what was actually the public face of my nationwide retail empire. "I found some time," I said lightly, following her voice. "My team has things under control." Mom didn't even look up as she stirred the gravy. Perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, as if the kitchen were just another boardroom. "Team?" she asked, arching a brow. "You mean that college intern you hired?" If only she knew that team referred to 500 corporate staff and over 10,000 retail employees across the country. But that was the point, they didn't know. "Not yet." "Something like that," I said, pouring myself a glass of wine. "Well," she sighed, "at least you're keeping busy. Not quite what we expected from a Stanford MBA, but it's something." Ah yes, the Stanford MBA. They'd always assumed I'd follow Mom into corporate leadership or join Rebecca in the legal world. Instead, I'd used that education to build something far bigger, and far quieter. Speaking of expectations, Rebecca chimed in, swirling her wine, "Did you hear? Mom's company is expanding again. Reynolds is swallowing up smaller retail chains everywhere." I took a slow sip to hide my smile. Reynolds Corporation, Mom's pride and joy. The company that was about to learn a very inconvenient truth. "That's great news," I said smoothly. "Any idea which companies are next?" Mom waved a hand. "Oh, nothing you'd know. Major players, not little boutiques. Though I suppose that's more your level, dear." The doorbell rang, and soon the house buzzed with more relatives, each armed with compliments for one another and quiet contempt for me. "Still running that tiny shop?" Uncle James asked over appetizers. "I've got some contacts if you're ready for a real job." "Thanks," I said, smiling tightly, "but I'm doing fine where I am." "Fine?" Aunt Sarah scoffed. "Jessica, your mother runs Reynolds Corporation. You could be doing so much more than pretending to run a dress shop." Pretending. If only they knew that the Corner Shop was merely the storefront of Cornerstone Retail Group, one of the largest privately held retail networks in the country. "Let her be," Mom said, though her tone was anything but supportive. "Not everyone's cut out for executive life." I glanced at my watch. The paperwork should have landed on the Reynolds boardroom table by now. Mom's phone was about to light up any second. And right on cue, it did. She frowned at the screen, excused herself, and disappeared into her study. "Another deal," Rebecca said proudly. "Mom's unstoppable." I smiled into my wine. "Maybe not this time." A sharp voice echoed from the study. "What do you mean, hostile takeover?" The entire room froze. Even the football game muted itself. "Should someone check on her?" Aunt Sarah whispered. "Give her a moment," I said calmly, swirling my glass. "I'm sure she'll want to share the news herself." The study door flew open. Mom stood in the doorway, pale and trembling, clutching her phone as if it might save her. "This has to be a mistake," she gasped into the receiver. "Cornerstone Retail Group?" Never heard of them, Mom said flatly. I couldn't help smiling. Actually, you have, Mom. You just didn't realize who they were. Every head in the room turned toward me as I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder identical to the ones now sitting on the Reynolds boardroom table. Let me explain, I said, spreading the documents across the dining table. Cornerstone began as one tiny vintage clothing shop, a store most people thought was a cute little hobby. Mom's expression drained from anger to shock as she leaned over the paperwork, eyes darting across the letterhead. No, she whispered. This can't be real. The corner shop was only the front, I said calmly. While everyone was busy laughing at my small business, I was quietly building something much larger. And that something, I paused, just acquired a controlling stake in Reynolds Corporation. The room fell silent. The turkey sat untouched, steam fading into the air. Mom collapsed into her chair, still gripping her phone, while Rebecca's fingers flew across her tablet. Oh my God, she breathed. They're massive. The market value, that can't be right. 28 billion as of last quarter, I said. But once the Reynolds deal finalizes, we'll surpass 30 by year's end. Uncle James blinked in disbelief. You? But you run a vintage store. I smiled faintly. No, Uncle James. I own a vintage store. What I run is one of the biggest retail conglomerates in the nation. There's a difference. This has to be a joke, Mom snapped. You expect us to believe. I slid my corporate ID and CEO badge across the table. Jessica Thompson, Chief Executive Officer and Majority Shareholder, Cornerstone Retail Group. That little shop you've all mocked for years? It's where it all began. Aunt Sarah stared at me, her voice trembling. All this time, every holiday, we thought you were just playing store, I finished for her. Yes. I remember. I kept my tone steady, almost businesslike. While you were all busy pitying me, I was acquiring companies, quietly, strategically. I built something bigger than Reynolds ever imagined. Rebecca's eyes widened as she scrolled through her screen. The Riverside Mall deal, the Turner Department Stores acquisition, the Atlantic Coast buyout, that was you? All mine, I confirmed. With a team I built from the ground up, chosen for their skill, not for who they played golf with. That line landed exactly as I intended. Rebecca didn't look up. Why keep it secret? Mom asked finally, her voice small, uncertain. I met her gaze. Because you never would have believed me. And honestly, it was enlightening, watching how easily you dismissed me. It told me everything I needed to know. The doorbell rang sharply, making everyone flinch. Through the window, a cluster of news vans was pulling up to the curb. That would be the press, I said, glancing at my watch. The announcement goes live in 5 minutes. You might want to touch up before the cameras come in, Mom. The press, she repeated faintly. What on earth am I supposed to say? I reached into the folder again and handed her a document. Our PR department prepared a statement. Something about shared vision and strategic growth, standard corporate language. Dad, who'd been silent the whole time, finally spoke. So when you said you couldn't come to family dinners because of inventory. I smiled. That was shorthand. Inventory, board meetings, merger negotiations, take your pick. Though I do still handle actual inventory sometimes. It reminds me where I started. Outside, the flash of cameras began to fill the front lawn. Reporters were already setting up for live coverage. I have to admit, I said, gathering the papers back into the folder, this wasn't quite the Thanksgiving I had in mind. I was planning to announce the takeover at Christmas. But when I heard about your latest expansion plans, I shrugged. Timing is everything. Mom looked at me, eyes glassy. What happens now? Now, I said, sliding the folder shut, you have 2 options. You can contest the acquisition, though I assure you, our legal team is quite prepared, or, I offered a small, knowing smile, you can accept a generous transition package. It includes a board seat, of course. A seat on your board, she repeated, disbelief coloring every word. You're offering me a seat on your board? I smiled slightly. Well, at Cornerstone, we like to keep proven executives close, I said, echoing the same line she'd once used when swallowing up her last rival. Though, this time, you'll be reporting to me. The irony hung in the air like perfume, impossible to ignore. Rebecca cleared her throat. And the rest of us? What about me? I met her gaze evenly. Did you belittle my business? Sure. Did you roll your eyes at my choices? Definitely. But did you actively try to sabotage me, like someone else sitting at this table? My eyes flicked toward Mom. She looked away, guilt flickering across her carefully composed expression. 3 years ago, she'd called in a few favors to block one of my first acquisitions, labeling it amateur hour. Your law firm does solid work, I continued. Maybe we'll send a few contracts your way, if your team wins the bid. No family shortcuts. A sharp knock came from the front door, reporters. The sound jolted Mom into motion. She smoothed her blazer instinctively, her corporate reflexes kicking in. Jessica, she said quietly, I don't even know what to say. Then don't, I told her gently. Read the press release. We'll go over your transition package tomorrow morning. 9 sharp. My office. Her brow furrowed. Your office? I nodded. The corner shop's basement. It extends through most of the block. Headquarters for Cornerstone Retail Group. You've probably parked beside it 100 times without realizing. The knocking grew louder. Uncle James had gone pale. Aunt Sarah stared at her phone, her mouth open, probably watching our stock ticker light up the financial news feed. One last thing, I said, pausing at the back door. Mom, you might want to update that photo wall. You've got a new board member now. Might as well make room. You're leaving? Rebecca asked, stunned. But, dinner? I smiled, a small, knowing smile. I have another Thanksgiving to attend. Every year, Cornerstone hosts a company-wide celebration at the corner shop. Executives, store clerks, janitors, we all eat together. No titles, no hierarchies. Just gratitude. Rebecca hesitated. That actually sounds nice. It is, I said softly. Because unlike this family, my company values people for their effort, not their pedigree. As I stepped outside, I heard Mom's voice behind me, steady, polished, as she began her press statement. We're excited about the new partnership between Reynolds Corporation and Cornerstone Retail Group. My phone buzzed. A message from my CFO, stocks up 12%. Congratulations, boss. I grinned, typing back, thanks. Save me some turkey. I reached my car, a modest hybrid, a far cry from my family's imported luxury lineup. Behind me, the flash of cameras painted the night sky. From the porch, I heard Uncle James sputter, but it's just a shop. How could she? They never looked past the storefront. Never imagined the small vintage boutique was just the surface of a global retail empire. They saw what they wanted to see, a failed MBA clinging to a dream. They never saw the empire forming in the shadows. Another ping, this time from Mom. We need to talk tomorrow. I typed back, 9 a.m. don't be late. Bring Dad, there's a second board seat open. He's the only one who ever visited my store without mocking it. Might count for something. As I drove off, the media frenzy swallowed my childhood home. I could just make out their silhouettes through the chaos, confused, speechless, and suddenly very small. But my thoughts weren't on them anymore. My real family, 300 employees strong, was waiting at the corner shop, where laughter and music spilled out into the street. People who believed in my vision, who helped turn a tiny store into a $28 billion success. Sometimes, success doesn't look like corner offices or inherited companies. Sometimes it looks like a modest storefront with a secret empire underneath. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't a takeover, it's proving, beyond doubt, that while they were busy underestimating you, you were building something they could never match. As I turned onto Main Street, I smiled. Next Thanksgiving was going to be very interesting.